September 2008. The air on Wall Street did not just smell like panic, it smelled like death. Imagine walking into a dimly lit, mahogany boardroom where grown men, titans of industry who literally controlled the world yesterday, are trembling. They are weeping into their hands. Trillions of dollars vaporized, wiped completely off the face of the earth in a single, agonizing heartbeat. Generations of generational wealth, empires built over decades, simply gone before the morning coffee even got cold. The entire global economy was standing at the edge of the cliff, staring down into an absolute, pitch-black abyss. But in the dead center of this financial apocalypse, amidst the screaming traders and the shattering of empires, one man stood perfectly still, unbroken, untouched by the slaughter. While the rest of the world was bleeding out on the trading floor, Jamie Dimon was already looking at the horizon. Welcome to men rising the sanctuary for the elite, the relentless, the men who utterly refuse to accept an average existence. I am your architect. Today, we are going to dissect the brutal, unforgiving reality of survival. We are going to rip open the mind of Jamie Dimon and decode exactly how he steered JPMorgan Chase through the bloodiest, most catastrophic financial massacre in modern history. But to understand the predator, you first have to understand the prey. Let us rewind the clock. The year is 2006. The entire world is drunk, completely intoxicated on cheap, flowing credit. Subprime mortgages were the ultimate party drug on Wall Street, and every single bank, every single suit in an office, was hopelessly hooked. The champagne was flowing. The bonuses were astronomical. Everyone thought they were an absolute genius because the line on the graph only went up. But Dimon was not dancing. He was sitting alone in the dark, staring at the raw, unfiltered data. And what he saw hiding in the shadows of those bloated balance sheets was a ticking time bomb. He saw the rot deep in the foundation. With heavy, exhausted eyes, he looked into the void and realized that the entire global financial system was built on a fragile mountain of sand. So he made a choice that absolutely terrified his board of directors. He ordered his executive team to sell, to aggressively, ruthlessly dump billions of dollars in subprime assets while every other bank on the street was desperately buying. Do you have any idea how agonizing that level of psychological isolation is? Can you comprehend the sheer willpower it takes to walk away from mountains of easy, short-term cash while the media literally mocks you to your face? Wall Street called him a coward. They laughed at him. They called him a dinosaur who had lost his nerve. But Dimon operated on a frequency of pure, ruthless European discipline. He was completely stoic, unemotional. He did not care about the applause of the sheep because he only cared about the survival of the wolf. While his rivals were gorging themselves on toxic debt, Dimon began quietly hoarding cash. He was building what he called the fortress balance sheet. He was stress-testing his empire for a doomsday scenario that absolutely no one else believed would ever come. Which brings me to you. Look at your own life right now. Look at your business, your bank account, your daily habits. Are you building a fortress or are you just chasing vanity metrics, building a beautiful, fragile glass house that is just waiting for a single heavy stone to shatter it into a million pieces? Because you need to understand something about the winter. The winter always comes. In March of 2008, the music suddenly stopped. The spark ignited. Bear Stearns, an 85-year-old titan of finance, was suddenly bleeding to death in the middle of the street. The United States government was in a state of absolute blind panic. The Federal Reserve had exactly one person they could call. The one man who had prepared for the storm. In a dark, silent office, the heavy red telephone on Jamie Dimon's desk began to ring violently. They did not ask him for a favor. They begged him. The voice on the other end of that line was shaking, and what they told him he had to do next, or risk the total collapse of the modern world by Monday morning. They told him he had to swallow a poison pill. The Federal Reserve, the most powerful financial institution on the planet, was utterly paralyzed. Bear Stearns was bleeding out, holding billions in toxic assets, and if it defaulted on Monday morning, it would trigger a global domino effect that would incinerate the entire banking system. They needed Jamie Dimon to buy the dying giant, and he had exactly 48 hours to do it. Imagine the crushing, suffocating weight of that moment. Friday evening to Sunday night. The longest weekend in Wall Street history. Inside the fluorescent lit war rooms of JPMorgan, there was no sleep. Only the smell of stale coffee, cold sweat, and pure, concentrated fear. Dimon's team was tearing through Bear Stearns' books, staring directly into a black hole of catastrophic debt. His own executives told him it was suicide. To absorb that level of financial disease could pull JP Morgan down into the grave with them. But this is where the architect separates himself from the victim. Dimon did not react with emotion. He did not let the panic of the United States government infect his mind. He looked at the chaos, and he saw leverage. Dimon knew the government was desperate, which meant he held the power. He was not about to play the sacrificial lamb for Wall Street's sins. So he executed a masterclass in ruthless negotiation. He told the Federal Reserve that he would buy Bear Stearns, but only if the government guaranteed $30 billion of the absolute worst, most toxic assets. He forced the creators of the crisis to swallow their own poison. And the price he offered for a titan that was worth billions just days prior. $2 a share. $2. It was a brutal, public execution of a financial empire, and Dimon orchestrated it without blinking. Let us extract the lethal strategy hidden in this bloodbath. Dimon utilized the principle of asymmetric risk. He aggressively protected his downside while capturing massive, historical upside. He did not buy out of ego. He did not buy to be the hero. He bought because the math dictated that he could acquire decades of infrastructure, clients, and market share for literal pennies, while forcing someone else to hold the safety net. Now, look at your own battlefield. When a crisis hits your industry, when a competitor is bleeding out, when the market crashes, what is your default reaction? Do you freeze in terror? Do you make desperate, emotional gambles to save a sinking ship? Or do you have the cash reserves, the emotional control, and the sheer audacity to walk into the room and dictate the terms of their surrender? Power does not go to the man who panics the loudest. Power goes to the man holding the liquidity when everyone else is choking for air. If you want to conquer your market, you must engineer a position where other people's emergencies become your greatest opportunities. Dimon walked out of that weekend as the undisputed king of Wall Street. He had saved the system. He had absorbed a rival for pocket change. The media hailed him as a genius. The government sighed in relief. They thought the worst was over. They thought the bleeding had stopped. They were dead wrong, because just 6 months later, in September, the red telephone on Dimon's desk rang again. The voice on the other end was Hank Paulson, the Secretary of the Treasury. Bear Stearns was just a tremor. The real earthquake had arrived. Lehman Brothers, an absolute leviathan of the financial world, was collapsing. But this time the government told Dimon they were out of money. There would be no safety net. There would be no guarantees. Imagine the chilling silence in that office. Hank Paulson, the man controlling the treasury of the most powerful nation on earth, was telling Jamie Dimon to jump out of an airplane without a parachute. Lehman Brothers was a financial leviathan, carrying over $600 billion in assets. But internally, it was a rotting corpse. The government wanted JP Morgan to step in and absorb the blow. They wanted Dimon to play the hero again. But this time, they were offering zero financial backing. If JP Morgan swallowed Lehman, they would swallow every single ounce of its fatal toxicity. Once again, Dimon summoned his inner circle. They locked the doors. They tore into Lehman's books with a desperate, frantic energy. But what they found was not an opportunity. It was an abyss. The numbers did not just look bad, they looked like absolute obliteration. The rot had spread too deep. Lehman was not just bleeding, it was already dead, and it was going to drag anyone who touched it straight down to hell. The pressure from Washington was suffocating. The media was watching. The entire global financial system was holding its breath, waiting for Jamie Dimon to say yes, waiting for the king of Wall Street to save them all. But Dimon picked up the phone, called the Treasury Secretary, and uttered a single devastating word: no. He refused. He looked the United States government in the eye and walked away. This is the psychological masterstroke of the elite. We must dissect the strategy of absolute boundaries and ego detachment. When Dimon saved Bear Stearns, the media crowned him the savior of the economy. Do you know how intoxicating that level of praise is? 99% of men would have let that title inflate their ego. They would have rushed in to save Lehman Brothers just to maintain their public image as the hero. They would have sacrificed their own empire on the altar of public approval. But Dimon possessed a lethal level of self-awareness. He knew that his primary duty was not to be the savior of the world. His primary duty was to protect his fortress. He understood the brutal difference between a calculated risk and a suicide mission. Now, look at the mirror. How many times have you compromised your own fortress because you wanted to play the hero? How many toxic clients, underperforming employees, or parasitic relationships are you currently subsidizing with your own time, energy, and money because you lack the spine to say no? You take on bad deals because you are afraid of disappointing people. You absorb other people's chaos because your ego needs to feel important. Listen to me carefully. If the math does not make sense, you walk away. I do not care who is asking. I do not care how desperate they are. Your empathy will be your executioner if you do not anchor it to ruthless logic. A true architect of wealth knows that the power to walk away from a bad deal is infinitely more valuable than the power to close a good one. You must build an emotional firewall so thick that absolutely no one's emergency can dictate your strategy. Dimon held his boundary. He hung up the phone. And on Monday, September 15, 2008, Lehman Brothers filed for the largest bankruptcy in human history. The dam did not just break. It disintegrated. The stock market opened, and the contagion went airborne. It was a financial nuclear detonation. But this time, it was not just the investment banks that were dying. The panic bled out of Wall Street and infected Main Street. Global credit markets completely froze. The lifeblood of the economy stopped pumping. Within hours, Dimon received intelligence that sent a cold, paralyzing shiver down the spine of even his most hardened executives. The panic was causing a run on the banks. Average citizens were preparing to storm the branches. If the ATMs ran dry, it would not just be a financial crisis, it would be mass civil unrest. Dimon realized the game had changed entirely. He was no longer fighting to save a bank. He was preparing for the total collapse of modern civilization. And just as he ordered his team to prepare emergency cash reserves for a literal doomsday, a black government car pulled up. Dimon was summoned to a secret, emergency meeting in Washington. He, along with a few surviving bank CEOs, were ushered into a windowless room at the Treasury Department. The heavy wooden doors slammed shut. They were locked from the outside. And the man standing at the head of the table looked at the titans of Wall Street with dead, hollow eyes, and handed them a piece of paper that would change the course of human history. That piece of paper was a mandate. A total, inescapable ultimatum from the United States government. Hank Paulson, the Treasury Secretary, looked at Jamie Dimon and the other surviving titans of finance and told them they were all going to take billions of dollars in government bailout money. It was the birth of the TARP program. And it was mandatory. Dimon stared at the document. He felt a deep, visceral surge of resistance. JPMorgan did not need the money. His fortress was secure. He had hoarded cash. He had built the ultimate defense. Taking government money meant accepting government control. It meant a public leash. It meant being lumped in with the very same reckless gamblers who had caused this apocalypse in the first place. Every fiber of a proud Wall Street king screamed at him to tear the paper in half and walk out of the room. But he did not. He picked up the pen and he signed his name. Why? Because Dimon understood the final, most terrifying lesson of true power. Pragmatism over pride. He realized that if only the failing banks took the bailout, the panicked public would instantly know who was dying, and the bank runs would rip the country apart. Dimon swallowed his pride and accepted the leash, not to save his own bank, but to stabilize the very ocean his ship was sailing on. He sacrificed his ego to ensure the survival of the entire ecosystem. He played the infinite game. And when the dust finally settled, when the bodies were buried and the global economy slowly began to breathe again, Jamie Dimon stood alone at the absolute pinnacle of global finance. He had navigated the deadliest storm in human history, not by being the smartest guy in the room, but by being the most disciplined. Now, the spotlight turns to you. I know exactly why you are listening to this. I know the quiet, suffocating anxiety you feel when you wake up at 3 in the morning. You are looking at your business, your career, your life, and you know deep down in your bones that you are not ready for the winter. You are exhausted from fighting battles that you should have walked away from. You are bleeding out your time and energy to people who do not respect your boundaries. You are paralyzed by the fear of what other people think of you. You are letting your ego drive the car, and it is steering you directly toward a cliff. It is time to burn the glass house down. It is time to stop playing the victim of your circumstances and start becoming the architect of your reality. You need to build the fortress. You need to cultivate the ruthless discipline to say no to the toxic noise, to hoard your resources, and to position yourself so powerfully that when the market bleeds, you are the one holding the scalpel. But you cannot do it alone. Isolation is the enemy of empire. I am looking for the 1%. I am looking for the men who are ready to strip away the vanity metrics and build something unbreakable. If you felt a fire ignite in your chest today, if you are finally ready to step into the arena and claim your power, I am giving you a direct line to the sanctuary. Open your email right now. Write to vodokviankny12@gmail.com. Do not send me your resume. Do not send me your excuses. Tell me the one toxic thing you are going to brutally cut out of your life today. Tell me exactly what you are going to sacrifice to build your fortress. The winter is coming. The week will be vaporized. The choice is yours. Write to vodokviankny12@gmail.com right now. Welcome to the elite. Welcome to Men Rising.